Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this stunning morning in stunning Sydney. Welcome to a vivid event. My name is Chris Krishnapillai, and I am very pleased to join you here on a morning such as this and an occasion such as this. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nations, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. You should also note that even though you're sitting in this room with this tremendous view out the window, which of course you won't be looking at because everyone speaking is going to be riveting, this is your experience, but we are in fact webcasting right now. So hello everyone in cyberspace. I hope that your environs are as lovely as ours are. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we consider the health of the nation. It's a subject close to all of our hearts, and indeed the rest of us as well, I suppose. I think that in the last few hundred years, human physiology hasn't really changed very much, but everything else has. Society is constantly in upheaval and changing, and in an era of increased connectedness, advanced technology, and big data, it really does seem like everything else has changed. So what does that mean for the health of people and the health of societies and the health of this nation? And what exactly does that mean for the way we address this in terms of our research and innovation? Today, we will hear from CSIRO, who with their partners in industry and in the university sector and in the private sector are doing their very best to actually change what it means to be a healthy human. In fact, we might be entering a new era in the way we think about our health. Perhaps we are entering a time when we stop thinking about the science of illness and rather start thinking about the science of wellness. But don't take it from me. Today we have gone right to the top. We have with us the Chief Executive of CSIRO, Dr. Larry Marshall, and he will make all of that make much more sense. When he's finished speaking, we have time for questions and answers, so please don't go anywhere. If you have any thoughts while Larry is speaking, note them down. Don't forget them because we really want to hear them. And following that, we will have plenty of time for networking and getting to know people a little bit better. So will you please now put your hands together and give a massive, warm Sydney winter Milton meeting welcome for Dr. Larry Marshall.
A catalyst. It creates a reaction. It creates change faster. CSIRO is Australia's innovation catalyst. We bring Australia's innovation ecosystem together to transform Australia's big challenges into global opportunities. We collaborate with our partners across industry, government, research and community to make it all happen. We seek and seize what's next on the horizon. We create solutions through science. CSIRO is Australia's national science agency. We wake up each morning because we're making tomorrow and the future better. Better for people, for business, and for the planet. We believe change is good, but transformation is better, and innovation is where it starts. The CSIRO, Australia's innovation catalyst. Your innovation catalyst.
Thank you. Now, can I also begin formally by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on here today, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Look, thank you for getting up so early on this somewhat rainy Sydney morning. It's even harder when we're right at the start of the flu season, so really good to see you all. And of course, CSIRO has tried to do its bit to counteract the flu season. As you may or may not know, CSIRO invented the original Relenza flu vaccine. But as I'll discuss today, our role in protecting your health has broadened considerably since then. So the question for today, this moonshot idea, can Australia truly be the healthiest nation on earth? Without question, it's a moonshot, and it will take many different parties across the system working together in bold, new, innovative ways. But moonshots are really nothing new for CSIRO, and nor are they new for Australia. In fact, you probably know well that CSIRO in particular and Australia in general supported NASA's original moonshot with those first images from Apollo 11 being beamed back to CSIRO's facilities in Parkes, the famous dish, and also at Tidbinbilla in Canberra in 1969. So to consider our chances at this new health moonshot, I'd like to share a little bit about our health history and then look a little bit at our health future, and then I'll give you some personal insights towards the end as to why I think Australia really can deliver. So the seeds of healthy innovation were planted by our earliest people in this country. For example, Aboriginal people living in the far north of Queensland used to soak, scrape and cook otherwise toxic seeds, like black beans, to make them a safer, nutritious part of their diet. For the past 100 years or so, CSIRO has played an important role in continuing that critical mission. In the 1920s, CSIRO scientists were hard at work on two very different crops. In Griffith, here in New South Wales, scientists were experimenting with orchards at the Commonwealth Citrus Research Station, testing the effectiveness of things like soil and fertiliser types, different bud selection methods, and different irrigation strategies. If you read CSIRO's 1927 annual report, the purpose of their work and the clear customer focus were really apparent. And they said, it's essential for Australia to be able to place the highest grade standard fruit on foreign markets if it is to compete successfully with other countries. Given a trip from Sydney to Plymouth by the fastest ship available still took 3 months, perhaps growing fruit for export from Australia to the rest of the world was a bit of a moonshot back then. The second crop that CSIRO had been working on was the prickly pear. This was a crop that had been imported to Australia in an ill-fated effort to harvest its red-coloured dye. And unfortunately, the fruit-bearing cactus flourished to become a noxious weed across the entire country. By the mid-1920s, it had taken over more than 60 million acres of land, thwarting crops and starving livestock. So in partnership with the New South Wales government and the Queensland government, and by the way, this is before the state of origin, the CSIRO scientists carefully experimented with a range of insects to eat the prickly pear, but they had almost no success. But like any good entrepreneur, they treated these early failures as learnings. And finally, after many tries, they discovered that the larva from the Argentinian moth was very effective, and they released these larvae, and within 10 years, the reign of the prickly pear was over. Now, this is one of the very few large-scale environmental interventions of the Western world that actually worked. And it set the stage for future interventions, like curing the rabbit plague, like curing the fly plague, like breeding disease-resistant wheat and other crops. In all, there are 5 major environmental interventions that CSIRO has given to Australia to make life better for all Australians. And just for the record, we had nothing to do with the cane toad or cockroaches. So I wanted to start today by talking about our long Australian connection with the land and its produce, because of its enduring connection to our health, even a century later. Not only do we know more than ever about the importance of diet, even down to personalising it for our individual genes, but the most sophisticated models of health today look at every single element of our environment to understand a truly holistic picture of disease. So let me talk about our work in health and what innovation in health looks like today and what it might look like going forward. It may surprise you to see how some of our work that was done a century ago is still relevant to a healthier Australia and even a healthier world today. A few years ago, we recognised the rising importance of cross-disciplinary approach to a new era of challenges and opportunities, some of which I'll discuss this morning. So we brought together people from all across the organisation, from every discipline of science, and we created a new health business unit for CSIRO and for the nation. Now, the internal change simply reflects the global movement towards One Health. It came from the epiphany that in the last 100 years, CSIRO had created one of the largest genetics groups in Australia. We also made major environmental interventions to make life better, but it had all been around plants, animals, and water. But if you look today, those 3 things are the sources of most major disease. Major pandemics no longer discriminate between animals and humans. So it was time for us to really step up again to a new challenge facing Australia. We also announced a new program of investment at CSIRO into areas of cutting-edge, pure science that we believed have the power to transform our existing industries and even possibly create new ones. We call them future science platforms. And this program that we've been pushing in the future science platforms we call Precision Health. Now, Precision Health harnesses the power of big data, including clinical, laboratory and genetic data, to generate whole new insights and improve treatments tailored specifically for individuals. It's a rapidly accelerating field powered by advances in biosciences like gene sequencing, understanding the interactions at the microbiome level of our bodies, and seeing differences in how genes are expressed through emerging work in the field of epigenetics. Precision health means we can shift our emphasis from treating the illness towards keeping people from getting the illness in the first place, by better predicting and even delaying the onset of chronic disease. It means we can adopt a wider view of health beyond the 10% that is driven by clinical care, to include other key influences of health, like our genes and our gut microbiome. What do they say about us? Considered along with environmental behaviour and social factors. And we can capture, integrate and analyse big data sets to build personal health profiles, moving from a one-size-fits-all approach to a more effective personalised solution. Now, these are the big trends in precision health. At CSIRO, we've been working specifically on developing an integrated platform that can be used proactively to manage your health throughout the course of your life, designed literally for a customer of one, you. It will feature highly tailored food and nutrition, lifestyle interventions reflecting community expectations and attitudes, and building on programs and developments already underway in the medical field. Another specific project at CSIRO is focused on developing a way to monitor in real time complex processes in the human body that can be the early warning signs of disease. We're working on the next generation of wearable sensors for well-being. And one of the first, if you can see it, looks a bit like this. It's a tiny, unobtrusive sensor that people with diabetes can wear to monitor their individual glucose levels. This tech could also be used by people at high risk of developing diabetes to help them regulate their diet and lifestyle to avoid getting the disease. On the topic of wearables, what about customising replacement body parts? Our advanced manufacturing teams have been supporting Australia's booming medtech sector. And in the past few years, we've partnered with an Aussie startup called Anatomics to 3D print customised replacement body parts that have saved the lives of patients around the world. Now, this is a titanium sternum that was custom made for a New York patient who was 20 years old, Penelope Heller, who'd been diagnosed with cancer 3 years earlier. Now, this combination of digital and materials technology can literally save lives anywhere in the world. So precision health can help us more accurately personalise our interventions. But what do those interventions actually look like? I mentioned earlier that our crops have played a critical role in our research for decades, from strengthening citrus crops to demolishing the invasive prickly pear. But today our agricultural research is improving the health credentials of Australian crops in ways the team monitoring the orchards back in Griffith could never have imagined. Never mind exporting Australian oranges back then, today we can add so much unique and innovative value to Australian-grown produce that we can actually resell it to the countries who used to produce the world's best. You might already be familiar with some of these products. For example, Barley Max grain. It's a CSIRO-developed whole grain with boosted levels of fibre and resistant starch that can help combat cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and colorectal cancer. It's already in supermarkets across the country, but you might not have realised it was created by your national science agency. Now, if you're headed to Germany for Oktoberfest this year, see if you can pick up a bottle of CSIRO beer. It's called Kabari. The brand name is Pioneer, and it's brewed from a CSIRO-developed new strain of barley that's officially recognised by the World Health Organization as gluten-free. Now, last year we sold it to the world's connoisseurs of beer, Germany, to brew gluten-free beer. But soon we're hoping you'll see it brewed in Australia. If you're headed to the US and you're craving a bagel or a pretzel or a pizza or anything else with a wheat base, you can do your health a favour and try and pick up one of the products developed with CSIRO-developed high amylose wheat. Now, this wheat has extra high levels of resistant starch, again, to help protect against diseases like bowel cancer and type 2 diabetes. Late last year, we started commercializing this healthier grain in the United States to combat the world's worst obesity problem. Now, these grains are just the entree, literally, from CSIRO's science delicatessen of high-value foods, all developed here in Australia. Now, in addition to boosting the health of all Australians, we identified that these high-value foods are really a strategic advantage also for Australia. So we've stepped up our research in the field to grow our national economy at the same time as we grow our national health outcomes. But it's not just our big agricultural partners that are benefiting from this. There are many, many small and medium enterprises and startups that we're helping grow in this sector as well. Now, you might have picked up in the lobby a bottle of pressure fruit. This juice is manufactured by a small Victorian company called Pressure Food, who worked with CSIRO to develop a premium fruit juice, a series of premium fruit juices that are pasteurised using high-pressure processing and not heat. We call it HPP. Now, the technology has the potential to extend the shelf life of chilled perishable products and provide improved safety, taste, quality, and nutritional value without having to use chemical preservatives. Now, Pressure Food started its life inside our world-class pilot plant at CSIRO Werribee, but they recently expanded their investment in HPP technology to become the largest HPP operation in Australia. They've created new jobs by growing sales both in Australia and in export markets, and they're starting to really be pulled into the booming market in Asia. It's a long way to where we started 100 years ago, testing soil and irrigation to ensure our orange exports could be competitive. Now, while we're opening up new export opportunities with high-value foods, increased global transport is also creating new threats to our biosecurity and therefore our health. As I mentioned earlier, the most sophisticated models of health now acknowledge that human, animal, and ecosystem health are inextricably linked together. It's a model called One Health. Now, over the past 30 years, we've seen an increase in emerging infectious diseases, with more than 70% of them emerging first in animals and then passed to humans. It means that the value of bringing together a diverse range of expertise for any given challenge is now essential to seeing all sides of a threat. Now, hopefully, as part of the wonderful Vivid Festival, you've had the chance to see the CSIRO light installation here on George Street, just around the corner in the Rocks. If you have, you'll have seen the beautiful but dangerous images of Hendra, Ebola, Zika, and influenza viruses displayed in stunning detail, magnified a billion times. Our work on these biosecurity threats takes place at our Australian Animal Health Laboratory in Geelong, or as we like to think of it now, the All Australian Health Laboratory. Originally built as an animal biosecurity facility, ARL is one of only 6 high-containment animal research centres in the world. They work on national and international human and animal health issues as part of a global One Health network. In recent years, ARL has expanded its research from protection of our livestock to work across the entire human and animal infectious disease spectrum. And in the past few years, our teams have contributed to global efforts to understand and fight outbreaks, as well as bolstering Australia's defences against new emerging threats. It's remarkable to think, in a few short decades, CSIRO has evolved from the inventor of AeroGuard to keep mosquitoes from biting you, to now bioengineer both the mosquito and the virus to treat Zika and malaria. So we're really on the front foot in protecting against and preparing for outbreaks. But we're also applying a cross-disciplinary approach to improve Australian health services. Bringing together medical and digital, we've developed science to help hospitals literally predict how many patients will arrive in an emergency, what their medical needs will be, and how many will be admitted or discharged. The Patient Administration Prediction Tool, or PAPT, draws on hospitals' historical data to provide an accurate prediction of their future. It's currently being used by more than 30 Queensland hospitals, and it's on trial currently in Victoria. We can also transform the rehabilitation experience for patients, including apps that we've developed, for example, for knee surgery recovery and for cardiac recovery. Both alleviate the pressure on our hospital system and on our health professionals, while at the same time significantly increasing patient comfort and patient outcomes, because we enable them to recover in the comfort of their own home. We can also connect our most remote citizens to health specialists in our cities through platforms like CoView. CoView is a new telehealth startup that recently emerged from CSIRO incubated technology and CSIRO people. It was accelerated through our National Science Accelerator called ON, which takes science off the benchtop into beta and ultimately to buyer. And then just last month, it picked up investment from the CSIRO National Innovation Fund, Main Sequence Ventures. CoView is a cloud-based healthcare experience that enables augmented reality consultations with a clinician anywhere in Australia. And it's an easy one-click video communication system combined with intelligent diagnostic tools to back it up. So the digital revolution is not just harnessing the power of big data to inform precision health, but it's actually enabling delivery of top quality health services wherever they're needed in this country. So I've talked a bit this morning about our history in health innovation, and I've shared a little bit about what's around the corner. There's one more story I'd like to share before I weigh up our chances on this moonshot. I want to tell you about why it's personally important to me. So I was an intern at CSIRO 30 years ago, and it was through seeing the deep impact that research done at CSIRO could deliver for the country that I realised the power of science to transform lives. So when I finished my PhD, I tried my hand at commercialising some of my own inventions and spent the next 20 years doing it in Silicon Valley. The invention that got me hooked on founding companies was the world's first solid-state green laser to cure blindness in diabetics. Now, as our company grew, we provided a range of lasers to ophthalmologists and later to dermatologists. A few years later, I was woken up in the middle of the night by my 8-year-old daughter saying, "Daddy, there's something wrong." I turned on the light to see her face literally covered in blood. A small vessel had burst on her nose, and when the bleeding didn't stop easily, I realised it was the vessel that's connected to the ophthalmic artery, which I only remember because we founded an ophthalmic company. Now, this is the first branch of the carotid artery, so it's a very high pressure bleed to have. And for a while, it was rupturing every second day with disastrous results. So 2 weeks later, we got rushed to a surgeon's lab in San Francisco, and he pulled out, guess whose laser, and cauterized the offending vessel on her nose. And when he finished, my daughter turned to him and said, "I'm lucky my daddy is a doctor." And the doctor said, "No, you're lucky he's an entrepreneur, and I'm a doctor." The truth is, as US residents at the time, we were all lucky that we had health insurance. CSIRO had an epiphany a few years ago, and we responded by bringing together a really broad cross-section of our science to tackle today's health challenges. Today, I'd like you to consider having the same epiphany that we had and realising that everything is interconnected. Our environment, our water, our plants, our animals, and our humans. We used to consider all of these elements separate, but our future is the intersection of all of them into a truly One Health approach. The One Health model means we now understand that the solutions won't come from one single discipline, nor will they come from one single institution. The challenges are complex and they need innovative, collaborative new approaches. But at CSIRO, we know that true innovation happens at the intersection of people and perspectives. Each of the recent breakthroughs I described today came from multiple fields of science working collaboratively together. At CSIRO, our innovation catalyst strategy is all about bringing the best and brightest together, from every field necessary to use the best science to create real-world solutions. to whatever challenges face our nation. At CSIRO, we're all about delivering the moonshots. This is why I think Australia's moonshot to become the healthiest nation in the world is well within our reach. Because in Australia, we believe you shouldn't have to be lucky to access the right doctor and the right treatment. We believe that not only should kids be able to access lasers to cure their eyes, but they should be growing up to invent the next generation of innovation for their children and doing it right here in Australia. When Bill Ferris and the Innovation and Science Australia Board released their 2030 report a few months back, they called for Australia to rally around this national mission. They proposed it not just because we could all be healthier, but because it inspires the next generation of health innovators. 100 years ago, Australians trusted CSIRO to improve their fruit export and rid our land of invasive pests. Over the years, we've delivered treatments for the flu and diets for our well-being. And tomorrow we'll deliver personalised healthcare right down to the gene and out to the furthest reaches of our wide brown land. A sustainable model for health, one that can make us the healthiest nation in the world, can't just be about treatment. We have to get ahead with prevention. CSIRO has a long and proud history of delivering moonshots across any number of endeavours, and health is no different. As JFK said, we choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Because that goal will serve to organise and measure the very best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, and one that we are unwilling to postpone, and one that we intend to win. Australia is unwilling to postpone being the healthiest nation in the world. Australia has a great advantage in this moonshot, because we recognise that health today means health across the whole system. At CSIRO, it's in our DNA, not just to deliver the national missions, but to deliver national benefit and improve the life of every single Australian. That's the real moonshot. No one left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And as promised, everyone, we have some time. And if my lurking in the back of the room is any indication, there are people taking notes. That's a sign that either they've got to do shopping or they're very interested and would like to ask a question. So if anyone has questions, the way it works is very simple. You stick your hand in the air. I point at you in a friendly but meaningful way. And then the mic wranglers, of which there is one, they're raising their hands, they'll come and give you a microphone so that we can hear what you're saying. Does anyone want to start us off? I feel like an auctioneer. I do have some questions of my own, but it's not about me, sadly. Does anyone have anything they'd like to raise with Larry before I... Well, you do. Thanks very much. Yeah, great. We're just over here.
Hi, thanks for a very interesting talk. You talk about the precision medicine. Regulation is very important in health. How do you think the regulation needs to develop to be precision regulators?
Yeah, you're straying into an area that I have to be very careful speaking about because I'm not formally allowed to speak about government policy, but we're doing a lot of work with organisations like the TGA. Australia has a wonderful advantage that for the last probably 10 or 15 years, most really innovative health companies in the United States have realised it's better to do innovation here because we don't have the FDA here. And so they can very rapidly find entrepreneurial doctors, entrepreneurial universities, organisations like CSIRO to work with them. But then there's a problem. You sort of lose that unfair advantage as you go to market with the product, and they run into a lot of delays, as they do in all countries. So we've been working closely with regulators like the TGA to help them understand the innovation perspective of health, and also as the National Science Agency and the most trusted science organisation in the country, try and give them some comfort of our involvement on really validating some of these things. But it's really important because there's so many incredible innovations across the system. They have to be safe, they have to be regulated, but we need them. Our health challenges are growing. As I mentioned, the rise of infectious disease, we've got to deal with it.
There's a hand there and a hand there. And what I might ask is that you don't have to wait till the end of the answer. So the gentleman just there because that way I can sort of pre-warn the mic bandits, and they can get to you really efficiently. So we've got one there, and the other one was, where was that? It was there, okay. That's next up. Cool. Please, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Marshall. Thanks for your presentation. I have a simple question. What is your individual health initiative doing with regard to obesity?
So, great question. And just for background, about 2 in every 3 Australians is either overweight or clinically obese. So we're not the worst in the world, but we're right up there. I think we're number 5 or number 6. So it's a really important challenge. I think I mentioned some of the nutritional interventions that we'd made around the various grains. We'd also capture, which can reduce obesity. I think also we're developing new data platforms to better understand, and of course, monitors, wearables that I mentioned. You called it an individual health program. It's really not. I mean, everything CSIRO does is connected. We work with all 39 Australian universities. We work with most of the top international universities, Stanford, MIT, Harvard. So everything we do is done in partnership. And that's the point, and I think I mentioned it, these challenges are so complex that it isn't done in a single vertical approach anymore. It has to be done in a highly collaborative field. And we find the best innovation comes from 5 or 6 different branches of science working together, many of whom are not considered traditional health science disciplines.
My question is about venture capital in Australia and how we actually change the mindset here. I've been trying to get some capital into some proton therapy, but a number of private equity firms, venture capitalists, great proposal, but still too early for us.
So you're looking forward to networking, right?
Well, it's changing the mindset. Like, when is it not too early, given that proton therapy has been, it's proven itself time and time again in Europe and the US. So I guess my question is, what are you trying to do to change the mindset in terms of venture capital in Australia?
Yeah, sure. So part of the reason for the Innovation Catalyst strategy was to address that challenge. So if just to quantify the challenge, about 10 billion a year funding research at the front end, about 2 trillion, 4th biggest capital market in the world on the other side, and in the middle, a big valley of death with very little funding to get the amazing science into market, into startups and products. So that's also part of the reason for the Innovation Catalyst strategy, but also a big driver of the Prime Minister's National Innovation and Science agenda. So if you look at that chasm, there was arguably between 100 or 200 million of venture capital at any one time. That's at least tripled, possibly quadrupled as a result of the National Innovation and Science agenda. So it's a big shift. Also the creation of the 3 biomedical translation funds, which were government supported. We still worry that, because those funds are focused on medical, we still worry that the 10 billion goes into many other things besides medical, and we've seen so much opportunity in those other areas of science that can help medical that we created Main Sequence Ventures, which is a $200 million fund to fund those things. And I didn't include us in that number. So I think the problem is being addressed by policy, but I'm still worried about the rest of science, because for One Health to work, you need all of science working together.
Any more questions? Oh, conveniently, except the microphone's gone now. Inconveniently, right next door.
Hi Larry, thank you very much for your talk. My name's Olivia Jenkins from Transport for New South Wales. My question is not really very transport related. I'm just still interested to know what CSIRO has been doing in the area of mental health. Just listening to Hugh Mackay and hearing about a potential epidemic of anxiety amongst our neighbourhoods. What's CSIRO got going on to inform us about the way cities work?
So for sustainable cities? Yeah, so we have a number of projects looking at that. We have a partnership with Celestino in Western Sydney for helping understand and develop either, some people call them sustainable cities, other people call them cities of the future or future cities. And we're also working in collaboration with groups like NTU, which is the fastest growing university in the world, in Singapore. Singapore is really advanced in developing sustainability in cities. But we look at it as a whole. So we do look at the mental health and well-being, but also everything down from human health to the sustainability of the ecosystem, so renewable energy, water reclamation, that whole package. We're also looking at a really big project in Canberra using land that we own to try and work with the ACT government to really develop that land in a very new and forward-thinking way that includes all aspects of sustainability. CSIRO has, I mentioned, one of the largest genetics groups in the country. We also have one of the very large social science groups in the country. We've used it historically to help the public understand the impacts of industry on environment. Big project called Jazeera to help understand what mining does, what oil and gas do to the environment, to really kind of give the data, the truth, if you like, to the public. And I think wellbeing will be a little bit like that project for us, to really demystify the science for the public and help governments and regulators. And by the way, thank you for the education investment from New South Wales Government. We really appreciate that, to work with you on that. But a really important issue because our cities are growing. It's part of the pandemic problem. Our cities are getting much denser. There's a lot more international travel. That's part of the driver behind the pandemic increase that we're seeing. And you're right, we tend to focus on the actual diseases and we forget that mental health is also a disease, but we don't forget that. We do work on that. I've also got 3 experts in the room, at least one of whom can help you with that question. We can follow up.
Got a question on your left over here.
Dr. Marshall, thanks again for your speech. If I just go back to the Moonshot of the 60s, I think it's fairly accepted that there was actually a geopolitical issue there that needed to be addressed in terms of Cold War and having won over the Soviets and whatever. So, and given that there's a lot of really great stuff happening through CSIRO, do you think there's actually a missing kind of a backbone issue that really unifies the good work, the fire in the belly, the need to do something like the health agenda, pooling all the funding, and the political kind of consistency and intent over like 10, 15 years?
Can I answer you this way? There are a lot of challenges for the country in innovation. When we started this new strategy, Australia ranked 81st for innovation efficiency, lowest in the OECD for collaboration. So we've got some real challenges. But I think one of the big ones is the lack of alignment. We tend to scatter like a flock of pigeons rather than getting lined up with each other behind a really focused purpose. So the thing I like about the Moonshot idea is it really clearly defines what problem we're trying to use our science to solve. And I'm talking about the whole system, the whole $10 billion of government investment, where it goes. I think that's a great way to drive alignment, to give people a common purpose. The Health Moonshot is the first. The Great Barrier Reef Moonshot is probably the second. I think that idea, though, it's about aligning science to purpose. And I think that can really cut through a lot of the sort of lack of collaboration because it gives someone something they can agree on.
Go for your life.
Yeah, so to follow up on the Moonshot metaphor, the original Moonshot had a very clear milestone, planting a flag in live television. What would you say is the first milestone where you think, well, we've done phase 1 now? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so bearing in mind it was only announced a few months ago, but maybe let's benchmark where we are currently in the world. So Australia, depending on how you measure, but if you use the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, then Australia ranks about 10th in the world today. Our life expectancy for Australians is about 83 years, which makes us 3rd in the world for life expectancy. Most Australians will have an average of about 11 years in ill health, however. And that's a problem because that makes us the highest in the OECD for the duration that we'll be in ill health. So that's a clue, I think, of an area to really focus on first, to try and improve that. We're also beset by, as I said, an increase in chronic disease. But let me put it into context. 11 million Australians suffer from chronic illness. It's a huge proportion of our population. And as I mentioned before, almost 2/3 of our population are either overweight or obese. We're, I think, 5th or 6th in the world. Actually, we're 5th in the OECD, behind Mexico for obesity. But the fear is we're rising. So to your question, whoever asked it about, thank you, to your question, I think there are 2 areas to really focus on. Can we enhance them, focus on prevention? I mean, if 11 million people in this country are suffering from chronic disease, that's an area we need to focus on as well. So I think benchmarking it first to figure out where to focus our resources and then to measure how we really improve that. So I've given you some numbers now. You can keep me honest and hold me accountable to them over the years as we try to deliver. I just re-emphasise, CSIRO is the national science agency. We're the most connected part of the research system, but we're only about 5 or 6% of that system. So we're a catalyst. We bring people together, we connect them, help them focus on challenges. We also have about 1,000 students in our 57 sites around the country. We try to help them understand the impact of science the same way I did 30 years ago by being in CSIRO, in the hope that they'll graduate, go out and really deliver some of these solutions as well. So we're really trying to catalyse and galvanise the system behind delivery.
Well, we've got one right in the middle here. I think we've got time for that.
Thank you for this. It's been really interesting. I read in the Innovation Science Australia report that the Moonshot idea was about inspiring a sense of pride in Australian research and innovation that the whole country could get behind. But I'm wondering how that works when there are so many areas in which we're innovating. Is that the right way to go? To get everybody thinking about one thing when really science is improving our lives across the board?
Yeah, and you're right, science is. And that $10 billion of funding, might even be 10.3 billion now, goes to all aspects of science. I think what ISA were trying to do, though, was give a couple of big ideas, a couple of big lofty goals to try and draw the interest of those scientists to that problem. As you know, you can't tell a scientist what to study, you can't direct them. They're inspired by their curiosity and creativity, but the hope is to inspire them with delivering on a really big idea. On the topic of inspiring, our former Minister, Greg Hunt, who's now the Minister of Health, had a real inspirational vision for CSIRO. He wanted us to become the best national science agency in the world. That's a really lofty goal. It's, in fact, a bit of a moonshot. So it was with some pride last year. There are 2 measures of innovation excellence that are kind of benchmarks. One is the IEEE measure, which is the biggest professional engineering organisation in the world, and the other is Thomson Reuters, which I'm sure you've heard of. So on both lists, CSIRO ranked in the top 20 amongst all research agencies and all global universities. So we were behind Stanford and Harvard and MIT, but on that list of the top 20, we made Australia number 3, which gave us a sense of pride. By the way, they're lists that 3 years ago we'd never been on before. And I mentioned, 81st for innovation efficiency and 32nd for collaboration. So, we sometimes think we can't do it, we're too far away from the rest of the world. But Australia, it's much better than we realise. We just got to believe in ourselves a little bit more, I think. Or as Michelle Simmons said, and she's not even from Australia, she came here to try and build the world's first quantum computer, and she's years ahead of her competition. She's drawing scientists from all over the world to that moonshot. So I think we just got to believe in ourselves. It's amazing what this country has done and amazing what we can do. So thank you.
Now, Larry, we're rapidly approaching time, but there's one thing that I'd like to know, and you've kind of touched on it, as have a few other questions. The thing about science is that there's no question that it's done good things for us, whether it's health and medicine or any other area you like. But we very quickly, somewhere deeply ingrained in us, is this habit of taking stuff for granted. That we just forget that there was a time when we didn't have antibiotics or you couldn't use a mobile phone. This stuff disappears from our consciousness. So I'd like to know, whenever, let's for argument's sake say, when we've become the healthiest nation on Earth by any measure, whenever that is, our grandkids, what are they going to experience that they take for granted? What is the great achievement or achievements that we're going to pull off now that they're just not even going to think about?
Yeah, if you think about the things that were impossible just a few years ago, so one of the, I mentioned I invented lasers and built companies around them for about 26 years in the Valley. So I invented one of the first stereolithography lasers. This is a laser that's used to do 3D printing today. So back then, 20 odd years ago, you could only do it in a polymer solution and you needed a ultraviolet laser. It was really, really hard to do, and they weren't usable parts. They were just for making a mock-up of something. And it's amazing to me today, and yet it took 20 years to happen, but today you can print a physical part that actually you can put in a human body and it works. We're even working on, one of the challenges in, say, a craniotomy is more than half the patients have to be opened up again because the implant, the brain gets infected. And they might have to be opened up 3 or 4 times to deal with that. So creating an implant that has antibiotics in it that only release to the brain if there's disease present, and creating the sensors to determine that, smart implants. To me, it's incredible that that's possible. I don't think we could have imagined that 20 years ago. And then the sensors, these little microchip devices that you can wear if you're a diabetic to actively help you manage your health. The cost to the system is in the billions for dealing with these types of diseases, which means that billions of dollars can be saved if we can help people not get sick, we can help people avoid them. I think that's a massive opportunity for the country. Another thing I mentioned, again, living in the US for 26 years, healthcare there is great if you can afford it. It's incredibly expensive, and I know that the health insurance premiums here feel expensive, but I can tell you they're order of magnitude less than I experienced it living in the US. So again, it's an example where Australia is way, way ahead of the curve, but we don't, to your point, yeah, I guess we don't appreciate how good we are in some of these areas, and it's not until you go somewhere else that you really can compare. So again, if we believe in ourselves, I think we can really deliver this. So thank you.
Now we've got 2 things we need to do. One of them involves your hand because people have been placing their business cards in a bowl.
All right.
I'm not sure if anyone told them why they were doing that, but it's in order to win a very nice bottle of CSIRO developed wine. And who is the lucky person?
Oops. Looks like it's an Internet of Things company. IoT Australia, tracking the Internet of Things.
Is there a person from the Internet of
There
Things
we go.
here? Oh,
Stuart Corner.
All right, Stuart. Oh, there you go. Oh, we got another one. Okay, good.
Okay.
We've spared no expense on wine. End of financial year,
Oh, now this someone has handwritten. Helena. Well done.
See, they laughed at you when you said you were going to handwrite your business cards, didn't they? But yeah, that is
So it's wine designed by science, but it doesn't taste like it was engineered by science, just so you know.
It's good to know. And I think the deal is that you're meant to share that with the rest of the organisation on your business card, which in your case is great. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that Larry mentioned earlier that we have some experts in the room. They're going to wave now. Oh, wow, look at you, self-appointed experts. Okay, so Conveniently, that Larry is going to remain behind, as are these three very important people. If you have questions you'd like to ask, just hassle one of them. If it's the wrong person, they'll handball you to somebody else. But the expertise there in terms of bioinformatics, emerging diseases, health, food, prevention, genetic breeding, etc. All that stuff is over there on that table, and it's pretty impressive if you want to get your way into it. There's still food, there's still coffee, we're still here. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. Please hang around if you can, and we'll see you in a healthier future.